Okay, so welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Biohacking in Silicon Valley.
It is wild.
And the source material that we're looking at is some excerpts from a podcast script called The Rise of Biohackers, Silicon Valley's Dangerous Obsession.
Yeah, it's a really, really fascinating look at what's happening out there.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how this whole movement is sort of like this spectrum of activities, right? You've
Yeah.
got people doing relatively simple things at home,
Mm.
and then you have others pushing the boundaries with like advanced technology.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the source material actually presents both the kind of gung-ho, super enthusiastic perspective,
Right.
but also some healthy skepticism, which I think is important to keep in mind as we delve into
For
this.
sure. So let's start with the basics. What exactly are we talking about when we say biohacking? I love how the source describes it as like tweaking the settings on your phone.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It really gets at the idea that biohackers are trying to optimize their bodies and minds in a very personalized way.
Right. They're not just passively accepting their biology, they're taking control. You're saying, okay, how can I tweak things to make myself function better?
Exactly. And they're using all sorts of tools and techniques to do it. Some are pretty common, like tracking your sleep with a wearable device or experimenting with nootropics to boost cognitive function.
Yeah, you hear about nootropics all the time these days. It's like the Silicon Valley version of a supercharged cup of coffee, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But then you have some biohackers taking it way further. Like the source talks about people implanting things like subway passes under their skin.
I know. Isn't that wild? It's like something out of a science fiction movie.
It is.
Hmm.
And it really highlights this blurring of the lines between technology and biology that's at the heart of biohacking.
But it's not all just about convenience and high-tech gadgets. The source also talks about practices like extended fasting, where people go without food for days at a time.
Yeah, and that's where things start to get a little more controversial. I mean, there's definitely a growing body of research on the potential benefits of fasting,
Right.
but taking it to those extremes, it's important to proceed with caution and make sure you're doing it under the guidance of a healthcare professional.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's the whole world of DIY gene editing.
Yeah, that's where the "Hold My Kombucha" line from the source really comes to mind.
I know, right? It's like, whoa, hold on a second. We're talking about altering the very building blocks of life here.
Exactly. And while gene editing technologies like CRISPR have incredible potential for treating diseases and improving human health, using them in a DIY setting without proper training and oversight is incredibly risky.
It really makes you wonder if this whole biohacking trend could be a kind of midlife crisis for Silicon Valley. Like, instead of buying a fancy sports car, they're investing in cutting-edge biotechnologies to try and cheat aging or enhance their abilities.
That's an interesting perspective. I mean, you can definitely see the parallels, right? The obsession with innovation, the desire to push boundaries, the willingness to take risks.
Right. And the source even mentions this guy, Brian Johnson, who's basically pouring millions of dollars into an incredibly elaborate anti-aging routine.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate example of high-end biohacking.
Yeah, his case is fascinating. It shows just how far some people are willing to go in their quest for longevity and optimal health.
Okay, so we've talked about what biohacking is and some of the different forms it takes, but let's get into the bigger picture here. Silicon Valley is famous for its move fast, break things mentality.
Right.
But how does that kind of mindset translate when you're dealing with something as complex and delicate as the human body? That's a question the source really wants us to consider.
Yeah, it's a crucial point. I mean, in the tech world, breaking things is often seen as a necessary part of the innovation process.
Right, you iterate and learn from your mistakes.
Exactly. But when you're experimenting on yourself, on your own biology, the stakes are much higher. You can't just hit undo if something goes wrong.
And the source brings up the Theranos scandal as a cautionary tale.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of what can happen when ambition and hype outpace scientific rigor and ethical considerations.
Right. They were promising these revolutionary blood tests that turned out to be completely bogus.
And it caused a lot of harm. So it's a reminder that we need to be careful about applying that Silicon Valley mindset to healthcare and biohacking.
But the source also points out that there's a key difference between Theranos and the broader biohacking community: transparency.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. A lot of biohackers are very open about sharing their experiments, their data, their successes, and their failures.
Right. They even have these conferences like Grindfest where people get together and swap tips on things like implanting magnets in their fingers.
Exactly. It's this whole DIY open source ethos that's both fascinating and a little bit unnerving, right?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it's great that people are sharing knowledge and collaborating, but on the other hand, you have to wonder about the quality control.
Right. Not all information is created equal, especially when you're talking about potentially risky procedures.
I mean, the source even mentions this anecdote about someone trying to edit their own DNA in their garage to cure lactose intolerance.
Yeah, that's a pretty extreme example. And it highlights the fact that the tools for biohacking are becoming more accessible all the time.
Right, you can literally order CRISPR kits online.
But having access to the tools doesn't mean you have the expertise or the understanding to use them safely.
And that brings us to the issue of regulation. I mean, for a lot of these biohacking practices, there's no FDA approval required, no clinical trials. It's basically the Wild West out there.
Yeah, and that's a major concern
Right.
because without some kind of oversight, it's easy for people to get hurt, either through their own experimentation or by following bad advice from others.
And the source tells this really tragic story about a guy named Aaron Trawick who injected himself with an untested herpes cure in a hot tub.
Yeah, that's a really sad case. And it shows the potential dark side of biohacking, where enthusiasm and a lack of expertise can lead to disastrous consequences.
So to be clear, his death wasn't directly caused by that specific experiment, but it's still a cautionary tale about the importance of proceeding with caution and not confusing innovation with recklessness.
Absolutely. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about some of the potential dangers of biohacking, but the source also highlights some more positive examples, like these bioethics collectives that are focused on using DIY science to make healthcare more accessible.
Yeah, that's a really interesting contrast. Groups like Four Thieves Vinegar are all about democratizing science and putting the tools for innovation into the hands of everyone.
Right. They're not just focused on individual enhancement, they're trying to solve real-world problems.
Exactly. Like they're developing low-cost, open-source medical devices and treatments that can benefit communities that don't have access to traditional healthcare systems.
It's like punk rock science, as the source calls it.
Yeah, I love that term. It really captures their rebellious spirit and their commitment to social justice.
So it seems like we're faced with this fundamental ethical dilemma when it comes to biohacking. Is it about playing God, or is it about empowering individuals and communities?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
And the source doesn't offer any easy answers.
Right. Because on the one hand, you have the potential for technologies like gene editing to be used to create a society of designer babies, where the wealthy can enhance their children's intelligence, athletic ability, or whatever traits they deem desirable.
Yeah, it's like something out of Gattaca, and it raises all sorts of ethical concerns about genetic inequality and social stratification.
But then on the other hand, you have the potential for those same technologies to be used to cure diseases, alleviate suffering, and improve the lives of millions.
Exactly. Like, imagine being able to 3D print insulin in remote villages in developing countries. That could be a game changer.
Right. So it's a complex issue with no easy solutions. And it really comes down to how we, as a society, choose to use these powerful tools.
And that's where the question of regulation comes in. Do we need stricter rules to govern biohacking, or would that stifle innovation?
The source mentions some potential middle ground approaches like biohacker licenses or open source ethics guidelines.
Yeah, those are interesting ideas. I mean, it's clear that we need some way to balance the potential benefits of biohacking with the risks.
And education seems like a key piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. We need to equip people with the knowledge and skills to make informed decisions about their own biology.
Right. The source suggests that universities could play a role by offering safe, supervised DIY biolabs, kind of like makerspaces for biology.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It would give people a place to experiment and learn in a controlled environment.
And it would help to foster a culture of responsible biohacking.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, we all have a stake in this. Biohacking in some form or another is likely to be a big part of our future.
The source mentions things like CRISPR babies, AI-enhanced brains, and even just smarter wearable technology. It's mind-blowing stuff.
It is. And it's coming whether we're ready for it or not.
So what can we do to prepare ourselves? I think the first step is to educate ourselves about the science, the ethics, and the potential consequences of biohacking.
I agree. We need to have open and honest conversations about these issues.
Right. Because the choices we make today will shape the future of humanity.
It's a huge responsibility.
Okay.
And it's one that we all share.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of biohacking. It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking conversation.
Yeah, and I hope it's left you with some things to ponder.
Definitely. Because the future of biohacking is ultimately in our
It
hands.
is. And it's up to us to decide what kind of future we want to create.
So, as you go out into the world today, think about the questions we've raised. Think about the potential benefits and risks of biohacking. And think about what role you want to play in shaping this exciting and rapidly evolving field.